Hey everyone, welcome to Tathastu-ICS. I hope you all are doing good. Well, today we are going to talk about something which is considered one of the most fascinating topics of contemporary history. And why fascinating? Because here is everything. Here is a geopolitical war between two superpowers, USA and USSR. Other than this geopolitical war, this particular thing is based upon ideological war, that which ideology is better, communism or capitalism. And other than ideological war, there are proxy wars and nuclear brinkmanship. We are talking about Cold War era, which was considered between 1945 to 1991, and we are going to discuss about this Cold War according to the events as they happened. We are going to talk about the chronology of the whole of this Cold War. Okay, so let's start this, but before that, here's a quick information for you. There are 4 beautiful courses which have been designed by the Tathastu team. Number 1 is MSLV, Main Success Launch Vehicle. Admissions are open here. You can write beautiful answers. Number 2, Prelim Success Launch Vehicle, PSLV. This is coming soon, and this is specifically focused on your prelims preparation. Other than this is the base for every competitive examination, let alone UPSC CSE. So there is a NCERT module, and you can register yourself here. And then there is a philosophy optional batch which is going to get started from 15th of September, and it will be helmed by Dr. Tanu Jain ma'am herself. Okay, this is the mobile number, and you can visit the institute also. Now let us start with the Cold War. As I said, that we'll follow each and every event. So the whole story, the story of the Cold War started with the end of the World War. As I tell students that if you see any event, please don't see it in individuality. There is a particular cause to that event, and then there is a particular consequence to that event. Now the cause to Cold War, some say that it is because of the end of the Cold War and end of the Second World War. Okay, so this Second World War, it happened between 1939 to 1945. Okay, so these were the 6 very bad years for the whole of the world. So in 1939 to 1945, it started in 1939 because Germany invaded Poland, and it ended 1945 with the 2 bombs which have been dropped on 2 cities of Japan, which were Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay, and after this millions of people died, and with the bombing of Japan, this particular World War II also ended. But with the end of Second World War, now there was a question that who is going to rule the post-war era, because when this Cold War was fought between 1939 to 1945, on one hand there was a power of Germany, which was led by Hitler himself, and then there was Imperial Japan on one side, and on the other side there were different countries, and 2 countries were United States of America and USSR. Both the countries were very powerful, both the countries had resources, but both the countries followed different type of economics, both the countries had different type of ideologies. Okay, and when the question arises ki who is going to rule this post-war era after 1945, because now the world is bipolar and there are 2 superpowers, एक मयान में इस वक्त 2 तलवारें हैं, तो वो तो कभी हो नहीं सकती हैं, तो which sword is going to stay in that particular cover, in that particular mayan? So since 1945, this particular Cold War started. The word has been coined by George Orwell in 1945, and this is called a Cold War because both the countries, USA and USSR, knew that we cannot fight a hot shooting war. Okay, because if it happens, then we have so much nuclear arsenal, we have so much arms at our backyard that we are going to destroy this earth so many times. Okay, so it's better to fight on someone else's land. That is why it is called a proxy war. They fought in North Korea, they fought in Vietnam, they fought in Afghanistan, they went to space, and there was space wars also. Okay, so we are going to track these events. So in 1945, with the coining of the word of Cold War by George Orwell, and with this event, with the bombing of Japanese cities, the question arises that who is going to rule the post-war era. Okay, then comes the another important event of 1947, when the American president Truman Harry Truman, he decided something, and it is called the Truman Doctrine. Okay, so there were two countries, Greece and Turkey. Okay, so as I said, this was basically a war between two ideologies. One was communism and another was capitalism. Now what is this? So communism, in short, although this particular topic will take us to another class, and there could be a discussion of 1 hour specifically on capitalism, communism, which one is better, which one could be better for the welfare of the society and for the welfare of the common people. But the whole idea was, the economic system in communism is that the production will be owned and the production will be done by the government. There is no idea, there is no concept of private properties, and government owns everything and everyone is equal. Government will distribute everything equally among the people. Okay, so this was the idea of communism. Capitalism, on the other hand, it talks about private properties. It talks about the capitalism, on the other hand, it talks about private properties, and it says that if there is an individual who is working hard on his particular idea, on his or her particular idea, then they would be awarded monetarily as they do their work or as the luck supports them. Okay, so the whole idea of communism and capitalism, the whole ideology is the production would be controlled on one side. In communism, it is controlled by the state, and on the other side, in capitalism, it is controlled by there's a free market. Okay, so this is the thing. Now what happened is, the president Harry Truman, now there is a Harry Truman doctrine, Truman's doctrine, and there were two countries, Greece and Turkey. So in these two countries there was economic instability, and because of economic instability, both these countries had insurgencies, communist insurgencies. The people were propping up and they were saying that communism is a better idea and maybe we should govern our state with the ideology and with the economic system of communism. And here Harry Truman intervened in these two countries, and then this whole idea came into being that if the communist ideologies are propping up in different countries, be it in the Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Asia, Middle East, anywhere, if this idea is propping up, then we should contain it. So the containment of communism, this idea came with the doctrine of Harry Truman. So that is why it is called Harry Truman's doctrine. He was president of United States of America in 1947. Now from 1947 to 52, there was another fascinating thing. This is called the Marshall Plan. Now this was Mr. Marshall. Okay, so the Marshall Plan, it talks about it is basically the recovery plan of Europe. Okay, so with the Second World War, as many European countries were involved there, be it Europe, France, UK, more or less every country, it started with Poland. So this idea, this Marshall Plan, was to support the countries of Europe, specifically the Western Europe, because the idea of Western Europe was quite close to the idea of United States of America, that was of capitalism, and the idea of Eastern Europe was quite close to USSR. That is why there is called, if this is the whole of Europe, then there is an Iron Curtain. Okay, you cannot really see it, but the countries who are lying in this particular area, they belong to they favor the idea of capitalism, and those countries who are here, they favor the idea of communism or USSR. Okay, so there is a Marshall Plan, US aid for the reconstruction of Western Europe. Now this particular idea, there were two things. One was there was devastation in Europe, so one thing was reconstruction, and another thing was that if the reconstruction is not done and if there is instability in that country, so this instability, it could lead towards the idea of communism. Okay, specifically in the Western Europe. Okay, as it happened in Turkey and Greece. So there is the idea that if people are quite dissatisfied with the idea of capitalism, that they might move towards the idea of communism. Okay, so this was Marshall Plan. Ideally, it says that we are here to revamp, to reconstruct the Western Europe But there was also one thing, that if we don't support Europe, and if the insurgencies and if the economic instability comes into Europe, then the whole of Europe could slip into communism. Then comes the 1948 to 49. Here is the Berlin blockade by Soviet Union and the airlift of supplies to the citizen of West Berlin by US and its allies. Okay, so what happened was that the West Berlin was encircled by Soviet Union. Okay, that usually it happened, I think most of you must have seen in the old movies, specifically in the Padmavat, what they did was, what Alauddin Khilji or the Ranveer Singh did was, as it was shown in the movie, that they encircled the whole of fort and they said that we would stop the supplies, would stop the food, would stop the water, and eventually the people will break and they will support us. Similarly, this could have been the idea, and the people, the authorities of USSR, they encircled the West Berlin, but the allies of United States of America, they showed resilience, and what they did was, for so many months they airlifted all the necessary supplies to West Berlin. कि ठीक है, अगर आपने roads वगैरह block कर दी तो we'll airlift everything there. Okay, so that was the that was the intensity of Cold War. Okay, there is a country who have encircled the whole of the city, whole of the West Berlin, and then there is a country, United States of America and its allies, that who are ready, that we are going to support our ally. If this is our ally, that we are going to provide them all the necessary things. Okay, so this encirclement and this airlifting was one of the major events in this chronology, in this timeline of Cold War. Okay, and then comes April 1949. Okay, now this is the thing, NATO is the thing which we have been talking recently, specifically after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. They took some part, Donetsk and all the other parts who were in the southwestern region. So this NATO was in this NATO came into force in 1949. In April 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was formed. Now, what was NATO? It was initially formed with 12 countries, and the idea of Article 5 is there. Okay, now what it says, Article 5 says that if you attack any country which is the part of this grouping, then each one of us is coming for you. Okay, and we will attack you. Similarly, now there's a recently this number increased to 31. For a very long time this number was 30, but recently Finland joined this in 2023, and with that the current number is 31. And the NATO says that if you specifically it is targeted to USSR, that if USSR, not Russia came in 1991. Okay, so we are talking about USSR. So if Russia attacks any member of NATO, then we are coming for USSR, and we'll attack, every one of us will attack as a group on United States of USSR, Soviet Union. Okay, then comes 1950 to 1953. Now this is also a very important thing. From 1950 to 53, the Korean War, or the division of Korea along the 38th parallel line. Now what was this Korean War? So for 3 years this war happened, and if this is the Korea, okay, I'm sorry with my drawing, but if this is Korea, then this was, the war started in 1950. The North Korea was supported by China and broadly USSR. So you will guess that what kind of ideology was here. There was communism. And this was South Korea, which was supported by UN and USA. Okay, now this is one of the first proxy wars which was fought between USA and USSR on a land which belonged to some other people, the Korean people. Okay, and the two ideologies fought here, the communism and capitalism fought here. The two countries who supported them were the northern side of the Koreans were supported by China and USSR. The southern side was supported by UN and USA. And this line moved. Okay, so sometimes South Korea gained some land, sometimes North Korea gained some land, but eventually after 3 years when this war was fought, eventually this was the line. When it started, the whole war started in 1950, and this was the line, and eventually the line which was drawn, the 38th parallel which was drawn as a boundary between North Korea and South Korea, it is more or less, it was Similar, exactly, more or less it was similar, okay, but millions of people lost their lives in here. And then did the Cold War, did this ideological war stop? No. This all proxy war, it shifted to somewhere else. It shifted to Vietnam, it shifted to Afghanistan. We'll see that. So in 1954 something happened. There was a defeat of French by Vietnam, okay. So Vietnam was colonized by French, and eventually French defeated it, okay. So with the defeat of French, what happened was Vietnam is also, here is Vietnam. So this is Vietnam, and this Vietnam also got divided into North Vietnam and South Vietnam. Now this North Vietnam was supported again by USSR, similar to North Korea, USSR, and this South Vietnam was supported by USA, okay. And this was the war which is specifically in USA, it is considered that this was an unnecessary war, where the money, because you cannot get information from Russia, from USSR, but in USA this was criticized heavily. The photographs came out and it was said that USA did something which was not required at all. So from 1954 to 1975, 1954 to 1975, almost 19-20 years, this war was going on and on and on, and the whole generation got wiped out and got consumed in this war. And eventually what happened is, the area, apparently the USA side and the allies of the USA, they had more power, they had more resources, but apparently the winner from this particular fight was USSR and the North Vietnam, okay. So from 1954 to 1975 there was a whole war, and eventually it was won by USSR. The Vietnam got though it was divided between North Vietnam and South Vietnam, but it मतलब वापस जुड़ गए ये, और the boundary, the distinction between them was no more, and the whole idea, the whole concept turned into communism, and eventually America lost its fight very badly, okay. Then comes the time of 1955. Although this was the time of 1944 to 1975, I told you the result which happened in 1975, but we are tracking the chronology, the events where it got started, okay. So we started with 1949, although we started with somewhere back here, okay. 1945, Second World War, then we 47 Truman Doctrine, then 47 also there was a Marshall Plan, then in 48 there's a Berlin Blockade, and we talked about that. Then after 48 we talked about 49 the NATO thing, and then after NATO the 1950 when the Korean War got started, and in 54 the Vietnams defeated the French, and from that time the fight between communism and capitalism started. Eventually America lost that fight, okay. Now in 1955 there was a signing of a Baghdad Pact, which is later called CENTO. Now what was this Baghdad Pact? CENTO is a Middle East alliance, just like NATO, which was done in Europe. So this Baghdad Pact, this CENTO, was done in Middle East, and it broadly took 4 countries, and that was Iraq, UK, Iraq, Iran and Turkey. Now these were the 4 countries who were the part of this Baghdad Pact, later called CENTO. And this CENTO, the idea of CENTO was also to counter the communism, okay, to counter the idea of communism. So NATO, CENTO, everything, and CETO, everything was against the idea of communism. Then comes 1961. Now this was US sponsored Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba, okay. Now what is this Bay of Pigs invasion? So in 1961 there was a leader in Cuba called Fidel Castro, okay. So in 1961 USA government, they tried to overthrow, they unsuccessfully tried to overthrow this Fidel Castro government, which was supporting the communist ideas. But when this happened, the USSR and the communist ideologies and the supporters of communist ideologies, they retaliated, and they secretly placed some Soviet missiles in Cuba in 1962, okay. And then comes the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now this was one of the one of the most crazy things in this particular scenario, or the thing which was seen by the whole of the world after the Second Cold War, because for 13 days the whole of the world was on the brink of everyone was praying that God, please don't this third world war let happen, because this Cuban crisis, the placing of nuclear weapons, the placing of missiles of USSR somewhere near in Cuba, the capital of Cuba is Havana, and the parts of USA, be it Washington, be it Atlanta, be it Chicago, be it Denver, be it Miami, they were coming in direct contact with the missiles, and the missiles were able to directly target these places. Okay, so that was the reason why everybody was so concerned. But eventually somehow the leaders they got sadbuddhi and they tried to move on, ki let it not happen. And then 1968, the Soviet intervention in Czechoslovakia. Now Czechoslovakia was one of the countries of Europe, and with the intervention of Soviet Union in Czechoslovakia, it was considered that yes, this because the Czechoslovakia was supporting the idea of capitalism, and with the intervention of USSR and communism in Czechoslovakia, the countries who were supporting the idea of capitalism, for example US and other countries, they thought that this fear is very much real and we have to fight it out, and at any cost we have to fight it out. Then in 1972 there comes another important thing, that US President Richard Nixon's visit to China. Now this was called USA's China card. This was called USA's China card. Why China card? Because I think all of you, I think you remember this, that I told you just now. Okay, there was in North Korea, the country which supported the North Korea was USSR and China. Okay, so China was a country who was supporting USSR, and with this thing, with USA playing the China card, there was a geopolitical win which USA considered, and the whole world was saying that this is a geopolitical win, but that now in 1972 USSR has started becoming quite weak, because 1992 is just around the corner after 2 decades, and they have been fighting for last 33 decades. And in 1972, if one of the prominent supporters of USSR it just went away, and it's meeting that the rival country, the United States of America, then it was considered a big win on America's part. Then in 1979 to 1989, the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, the Soviets, they entered Afghanistan, and they said that we will establish our communist idea in Asian parts also, in Afghanistan also, and this was considered one of the most one of the biggest mistakes by USSR, okay, by Soviet Union, because it took them a hell lot of effort and hell lot of economic support to support these proxies, to support the idea of communism in this part. And what USA did was, USA supplied arms to the people, to the Afghan resistance, who called themselves the Mujahideens, okay. And that is why it has been said that the people who are the part of current Taliban regime, somehow the economic resources, the weapons to fight the war against the USSR, they've been provided by United States of America, but eventually now the Taliban is so strong that they are using it against their own people, and against the eventually they are the group who ousted United States of America after so many years, and now they are ruling the whole of the country. We all know the history, how it happened. Okay, so 1979 to 1989 there was a Soviet-Afghan war, and Soviet Union tried to invade or impose their communist regime here, but the United States of America, they provided them the Afghan resistance, the Mujahideens in the Afghanistan, the ample amount of economic resource which was required, and eventually USSR lost here. Okay, in 1979 this happened. In 1985 Gorbachev becomes the president of USSR and begins the reform process. Okay, so in 79 when this thing started, although it ended in 1989, but in 85 it was realized by everyone that this this was the game which has been lost on the part of USSR, on the part of Soviet Union. That is why the guy, Gorbachev, he proposed two reforms there. One was Perestroika and one was Glasnost. Now both the reforms were, one was a political reform, another one was a economic reform, and these two reforms were against the idea of Soviet Union, were considered quite against the idea of communism. And with the passing of these two reforms, it was considered that the Soviet Union considered defeat herself. Okay. In 1990s, after 1985, in 89, something happened, that the fall of Berlin Wall, mass protest against the governments in Eastern Europe. Now, similarly, the Eastern Europe, which was under the influence of communism, which was under the influence of Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union, which considered its defeat, at least ideologically, in 1985, with the reforms of Perestroika and Glasnost, which have been passed by which were passed by Gorbachev. So in till 1889, everybody realized in the Eastern Europe that because with this particular thing, with the downfall of USSR, they were having economic distress, there was political distress in the whole of the economy. Okay, they were not having ample amount of resources to cater the public, to cater the hungry public who was there. So in 1989, the people gathered around the Berlin Wall, and this Berlin Wall, which was the symbol of Cold War, this Berlin Wall, which literally divided the city into two different parts, which one was controlled by another country, USA, another was controlled by another country, Soviet Union. So this was a symbol of Cold War, and it got broken by the common masses. And with that, with the fall of that particular wall, the Germany got unified. Same Germany which started the Second World War, which was so powerful in 1939. It was so vulnerable for next 50-60 years that the one city which they had was divided by two and controlled by two different powers and two different ideologies. Okay, in 1990, the Germany got unified, and with the unification and the fall of Berlin Wall and the unification of Germany, the Soviet Union got disintegrated into different nation states. Okay, and after 1945, in 1991, this was the time when this whole of the Cold War, it got wind up, and eventually the United States of America, as we started that एक मैदान में दो तलवारें नहीं हो सकती, और वो हुआ भी ऐसा ही कि थोड़ा सा टाइम लगा. It took 45 years, but after 45 years, the USA established themselves that they are the ones who are going to rule the world. The time of a bipolar world, which started after Second World War till 1991, has ended, and with 1991 there is a new world, there is a unipolar world, and USA, United States of America, is a Betaj Badsha. And from there, that phrase got circulating that if United States of America, if USA sneezes, then the whole of the world will catch the cold. Okay, so USA became so powerful, it had so much dominance on the rest of the world and the countries of the rest of the world. Uncle Sam was absolutely amazingly powerful, although there are now talks of de-dollarization and everything. But this was the time period after 1991 till now. USA is enjoying supreme legacy, USA is enjoying supreme power. And as we know that although we have talked about de-dollarization and everything, but now, for now, we are concluding this Cold War thing, and we try to understood with all the events that what has actually happened, how this all of the Cold War got started in 1945 and how it got winded up in 1991. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the class. We'll meet in the other session. Until then, keep watching, like the video if you like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much.